Let me ask you something. When was the last time you felt like you were thinking too much, like your brain simply refused to shut off? Or maybe you've always felt slightly out of place, like everyone else got a manual for how to exist, and you're somehow running on a completely different operating system. Here's what's strange. The things you've probably been told are your flaws. The overthinking, the sensitivity, the weird habits nobody understands. Psychologists are finding something remarkable. Those might not be flaws at all. They might be the clearest signals of a mind operating at a level most people never reach. Today, we're uncovering 10 psychological traits of people with surprisingly high IQ. And I promise you, by the time we reach number 7, you're going to look at yourself very differently. This isn't a video about IQ scores or standardized tests. Because here's the truth, a number on a test has never captured what the human mind is truly capable of. What we're talking about today is deeper than that. We're talking about how certain people process reality. How they react, how they feel, how they move through the world, often without even knowing what they carry inside them. Some of the most extraordinary minds in history didn't walk around announcing their intelligence. They just lived differently, quietly, intensely, curiously. So if any of what you're about to hear feels familiar, pay attention. Let's get into it. Small talk feels like sandpaper to them. Not because they're antisocial or rude, but because their brain is constantly operating at a depth that surface-level conversations simply can't reach. Ask them about the weather and they'll give you a polite answer. But inside, their mind has already wandered into something far more interesting. Psychologists studying cognitive complexity have found that individuals with higher intellectual capacity tend to experience something called epistemic hunger, a near-physical need for meaningful exchange of ideas. Think about it this way. Imagine spending your entire day eating only rice crackers when your body is craving a full meal. That's what shallow conversation feels like to a high IQ mind. They don't avoid people. They avoid emptiness. And the moment someone brings up a real idea, philosophy, science, a strange moral dilemma, watch how quickly they light up. That sudden spark? That's their natural state finally being met. Here's something nobody talks about. High IQ individuals frequently report losing track of time in ways that feel almost alarming to people around them. Not from distraction, from depth. When they engage with something that challenges them mentally, the prefrontal cortex enters a state that neuroscientists describe as deep cognitive absorption. Time literally stops registering the way it does for others. A researcher at Carnegie Mellon University described this as the brain entering a kind of internal full-screen mode, where external inputs like clocks, hunger, even physical discomfort get temporarily filtered out. This is why the highly intelligent person forgets to eat lunch, loses 3 hours to a book they just started, or stays up until 3 a.m. because their mind latched onto a problem it refuses to let go of. To others, it looks like carelessness. To a psychologist, it looks like a brain doing exactly what it was built to do. This one surprises people. You'd expect someone with a high IQ to be able to explain everything clearly. But often, the opposite is true. Their thinking is so fast, so layered, and so non-linear that converting it into simple spoken words feels like trying to describe a symphony using only 3 musical notes. Cognitive linguists call this the fluency gap, where the speed and complexity of internal processing outpaces the brain's ability to translate it into language in real time. You'll notice this in how they pause mid-sentence, how they say it's hard to explain, how they use analogies and metaphors instinctively, because sometimes a comparison is the only bridge close enough to their actual thought. This is not a communication failure. It's what happens when a mind is moving faster than words can keep up. They don't break rules out of rebellion. They question rules because they've already traced them back to their origin, and sometimes, the origin doesn't hold up. Developmental psychologists studying gifted cognition have found that individuals with high intellectual capacity engage in what's called systemic rule evaluation. Rather than accepting a rule as given, their brain automatically asks, who made this, why does it exist, and does it still apply? This can make them difficult to manage in rigid environments. Schools, corporate systems, strict social hierarchies. History is full of examples. Innovators who were told they were difficult, unconventional, or simply too much, who later rewrote the rules entirely. Their discomfort with blind obedience isn't arrogance. It's the natural output of a mind that can't accept a locked door without first asking whether the lock was ever necessary. This is one of the most quietly painful aspects of high IQ, and it's rarely discussed openly. It's not the loneliness of having no one around. It's the loneliness of feeling fundamentally unseen even in a room full of people. Clinical psychologists working with intellectually gifted adults consistently report one theme above all others: the feeling that no one is quite on the same channel. Not better. Not worse. Just different. And because they're often skilled at reading social cues, they know exactly how to perform normalcy. They laugh at the right moments. They follow the conversation. But internally, there's a part of them quietly watching from a distance. The tragedy is that this loneliness often goes unnoticed, even by those closest to them. The gift is that this same depth of feeling drives them toward art, toward philosophy, toward human connection at a level that most people never pursue. Even injustice that has nothing to do with them personally. A story on the news about something unfair happening thousands of miles away will stay with them for days. Why? Because a high IQ mind doesn't just observe injustice, it processes it. It traces the root causes. It imagines the human experience on every side. And it feels the weight of what could have been different. Moral philosopher research from Oxford's Uehiro Center suggests a strong link between advanced reasoning ability and what they call ethical sensitivity, a heightened responsiveness to fairness, equity, and systemic imbalance. This is why many of history's great thinkers became activists, writers, and reformers. Not because it was convenient, but because their minds gave them no option to look away. They don't always laugh at what everyone else finds funny. But when something does hit them, the laughter is real, deep, and often contagious. High IQ humor tends to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. A pun works because of sound. An ironic observation works because of context. Absurdist humor works because it exposes the gap between how things are and how they're supposed to be. Psychologists at the University of New Mexico found a meaningful connection between humor appreciation and abstract reasoning ability. Understanding a joke, especially a complex or layered one, requires the brain to hold multiple frames of meaning at once and collapse them into a single surprising conclusion. That's not simple. That's cognitive gymnastics. So if your sense of humor sometimes confuses people around you, that might be a feature, not a flaw. You know, what strikes me most about everything we've covered so far is this: so many of these traits have probably been pointed out to you as problems. You think too much. You feel too much. You're too sensitive. Too serious. Too different. But the science keeps saying the same thing. These aren't bugs in the system. They're how the system runs at full power. Let's keep going, because the next 3 traits are where it gets even more fascinating. Whether it's a friendship, a project, or a belief system, they don't jump in easily. And that frustrates people who want quick answers. But here's what's actually happening. A high IQ brain is running something like a background verification process before committing. It's evaluating consistency, checking for contradictions, and stress testing the relationship or idea against every scenario it can generate. Behavioral researchers studying long-term decision patterns found that individuals who scored higher on cognitive measures tended to take longer in commitment decisions, but reported significantly higher satisfaction and stability in those choices over time. They're not cold. They're not indecisive. They're just not willing to give their full attention to something that hasn't earned it yet. But when they do commit, they're all in. Completely. Quietly. Immovably. Simple things bore them fast. Not because they want to show off, but because simplicity, once understood, no longer demands anything from them. And a mind like theirs needs to be demanded of. Complexity is not intimidating to them. It's inviting. A tangled problem is an open door. A field they know nothing about is a puzzle box waiting to be explored. Research in cognitive motivation shows that people with higher fluid intelligence, the ability to reason through new problems, show measurably stronger reward responses to complex challenges. Their brain's dopamine system is more activated by difficulty than by ease. Put simply, the harder the problem, the more alive they feel. This is why they often seem restless in stable environments. Not because they're ungrateful, but because calm water, to a mind built for deep seas, eventually feels like standing still. Not as a child's reflex. Not as a habit. As a compulsion. The why behind the why behind the why. Until they reach something that feels true, or until they discover that the truth is far more layered than anyone admitted. Psychologists call this need for cognition, and it is, perhaps more than any other trait, the single clearest marker of a highly intelligent mind. Albert Einstein reportedly said that he wasn't particularly special, just relentlessly curious. And while that's modest to a fault, the core of it is true. Curiosity is not passive. In a high IQ individual, it is a drive. An engine that doesn't have an off switch. They read things they don't need to read. They learn about fields that have nothing to do with their life. They ask questions in conversations that make people pause because, when was the last time someone asked them that? And here's the most powerful thing about this trait. It cannot be faked. It cannot be manufactured. And it cannot be taught to someone who doesn't already carry it. If you've watched this entire video, still here, still listening, I'd ask you honestly, does any of this feel like you? Because curiosity brought you here. And curiosity, according to every serious psychologist who has studied the human mind, is not a personality quirk. It is the engine of intelligence itself. So here's what I want you to take away from today. Intelligence is not a trophy sitting on a shelf. It's not a test score or a diploma or the speed at which you can recall facts. It is a way of living inside your own mind. It's the sensitivity that picks up what others miss. The depth that makes simple answers feel incomplete. The loneliness that comes from being wired differently, and the quiet power that lives inside that difference. If you recognized yourself in any of these traits today, hold on to that. Not as an excuse. Not as superiority. But as understanding. Because understanding yourself is the first, and the rarest, form of intelligence. So tell me in the comments, which of these 10 traits felt the most like you? I genuinely want to know. And I promise you, you're not as alone in that answer as you think. If this video made you see yourself a little more clearly, share it with one person who you think needs to hear it too. Hit subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into how the human mind actually works. And right now, click the video on your screen. Because where we're going next, it gets even more interesting. I'll see you there.